What's up, everybody? TGVReacts here with a new video, but you already knew that, right? Yeah, got that notification bell turned on, didn't you? You got that little notification bubble pop up at the top of your phone, didn't you? Right. But anyway, folks, enough about me. I hope you having a great day, a blessed day, a grassy day. If not, get yourself right. Come on back to the video. I'll be right here waiting. But now we gonna jump straight into the video. We are looking at insane conspiracy theories that turned out to be true by the Infographics show. So let's get to it.
We're back with even more insane conspiracy theories. Some might have seemed to be wild and even totally implausible at one time, and some even spent years totally obscured from the public. But all of these were eventually revealed, at least in part, to be true. And some of them are even stranger than fiction, from shady government scandals to aliens buried out in the desert, to ghosts at sea that started a war, and even a secretive meeting between some of the wealthiest people in the world that involved strange rituals in front of a big stone owl. These are the insane conspiracy theories that turned out to be true, part 2. Let's start with one that seems so obvious that it would almost be more surprising if it weren't true. And that's...
Well, if this is part 2, do we have a part 1? I mean, the video itself doesn't even say part 2, so we're just gonna keep moving like nothing happened. We're just gonna keep moving like nothing happened, you know?
That's the theory that the government is watching your every move. It's hardly an overstatement to say that in our modern technology-driven world, you're never more than a few feet from a camera, whether it's part of a closed-circuit system or even those that are found near roads designed to catch speeding drivers. But think about how many other places you'd find a camera. Your smartphone's got multiple, and your laptop or PC will likely have a webcam, just to name a few. What's stopping the government from using these devices to spy on you? Well, nothing, actually. In fact, it's completely legal for them to do so. Mass surveillance is hardly a new innovation, as dystopian as the concept might feel. In the United States alone, there exist multiple federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies that serve the function of conducting surveillance over the population, like the National Security Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Central Intelligence Agency. While this is often done in the name of security to protect the public from the threat of acts of terrorism, surveillance on this scale is also a tool used to silence political dissent, often by targeting particular individuals and organizations. Although it generally requires exploiting software security vulnerabilities, the government can technically use cameras in your devices to spy on you. The FBI even has access to technology that can remotely access webcams without triggering the light that indicates the camera is active. And they've been able to do this for years. Remote activation tools, known by the fitting acronym RATS, are a form of spyware that the FBI uses for criminal investigations. Ratting is reportedly done only sparingly, but it's hardly reassuring, knowing that they can watch us without being able to even tell. In 2013, a former contractor who had worked for the NSA leaked documents that exposed some of the extensive surveillance programs conducted by the NSA, FBI, and CIA. The now infamous Edward Snowden revealed that massive swaths of data had been gathered by these agencies from sources including social media websites and email exchanges in order to form comprehensive profiles of U.S. citizens based on their online activity. The leaks also highlighted the potential for governments to remotely access cameras and microphones of personal electronic devices for these purposes. So it's not just the hackers, stalkers, and other cybercriminals to be wary of when you're perusing the internet. The government could be keeping an eye on you too. After all, having your own FBI agent watching you has long been a running joke online, featured in various memes. Ours is called Jonathan, and even though we can't see him, we know he can see us. Unsettling. From one tale of shadowy governmental overreach to an attempt to suppress...
I'ma just say, before he moves on to the next topic, as far as the government being able to watch us, and cameras being everywhere, it's really not that far of a stretch to believe, especially when, in my case, my situation that I want to say I had for that is I had my PlayStation camera and I was streaming, I want to say the day before, and the day this happened, I don't remember if I was streaming or not. And if I was, the incident happened after. So what happened was the red light that I see on my camera now to let me know that I'm recording was on. And I didn't realize or didn't even notice for God knows how long. But mind you, I was just sitting here playing the game and didn't really think too much of it. But after taking the camera and unplugging it, I realized that, you know, people, hackers, they can really get into your webcam and see what you're doing. That's why I'm glad I got this one here with a cover. You can't really see it, but yeah, I got a cover on this one so I don't have to worry about that anymore, because the internet is getting scary now, folks. You really got to protect yourself, watch yourself, and be mindful of what you post out here, because they can now build a case against you based off of what you post online, which is crazy. It's crazy. But it's just this. But this is the dystopian world we live in now. Back to the video.
Press political opposition that became so infamous that its name has been immortalized in the Conspiracy Theory Hall of Fame. It was 1972, and the several-month-long build-up toward the next presidential election was already underway, with Republican President Richard Nixon running against Democrat candidate George McGovern. Little did the public know that a discovery was about to be made that threatened to upend the entire election process, and the president himself knew about it. Several months before the election, Frank Wills, a security guard working at an office, apartment, and hotel complex in Washington, D.C., discovered that various locks around the complex had been tampered with. Suspecting a possible break-in, Wills called the police, who arrived and apprehended 5 burglars who had forced an entry into the offices of the Democratic National Committee. But this wasn't about a score, because these weren't ordinary burglars. While inside, they'd intended to steal several important campaign documents and attempted to plant bugs to listen in on phone lines. Upon investigation, it was discovered that 4 of these 5 men were former agents of the Central Intelligence Agency and had been involved in actions against Cuban leader Fidel Castro. At the time, though, the press reported that the attempted burglars were Cubans, despite only 3 of them having Cuban heritage. The 5th was a security chief for the Committee to Re-elect the President, or CREEP for short.
CREEP.
They had conspired with a former FBI agent who is a counsel for CREEP, as well as another high-ranking CIA officer who'd recently been appointed to the staff of the White House. As this tangled web began to unravel, it seemed to point to one man being at the center, President Nixon himself. He made aggressive attempts to cover up the scandal and was believed to have even hired the 5 men in the first place, but this did little to prevent journalists from the Washington Post from uncovering his role in the conspiracy. This botched attempt at an act of blatant political sabotage was what ultimately led to the downfall of the Nixon administration, with almost 70 people being impeached as a result. Nixon resigned from office in 1974, since Congress couldn't impeach him if he were to step down. Thus, he avoided facing criminal charges. The scandal would eventually be named after the hotel that it started in, the Watergate complex. This Watergate scandal forever changed U.S. politics, leading many Americans to think more critically about their leaders. After all, if the president could use his power to attempt to cover up something like this and get away with it, then it didn't exactly smack of being trustworthy. And if mass surveillance and an administration trying to snuff out its opposition secretly weren't enough government overreach for you, there's an arguably darker conspiracy theory that turned out to be true.
So I've heard of Watergate before, but I never looked into it. But now, piecing that together with what is recently came out about Hillary Clinton and her Pizzagate shit, it just seems like gate is a code word for them to use, and then they just tack on an average everyday word in front of it. Water, pizza. Next you're gonna hear Skygate, or, you know, it might involve airlines, probably an airline scandal. But damn, let's keep going.
One that might have led to thousands of Americans being poisoned by the government. A while ago, an alarming factoid was circulating on the internet. that in 1926 the federal government had poisoned alcohol in an effort to discourage the public from drinking during Prohibition. This was, of course, a real thing. Well, Prohibition was anyway, as between 1920 and 1933 it became illegal to sell, produce, or even transport alcoholic beverages. But naturally, this didn't stop people from buying, drinking, and often making their own booze. According to the claim, though, the government added poisonous substances to alcohol as a way to crack down on the number of people drinking it. Apparently, this event caused an estimated 10,000 deaths before Prohibition was eventually ended in 1933. But the truth is a little more nuanced. The government wasn't exactly sneaking into black market distilleries and emptying barrels marked with the skull and crossbones into the booze like some cartoonish supervillain. In actuality, when the 18th Amendment was passed bringing Prohibition into effect, this led to regulatory agencies encouraging measures to make alcohol used for industrial purposes undrinkable by adding lethal chemicals like methyl alcohol or wood alcohol to grain alcohol, making it poisonous. This wasn't done to any alcohol that was intended for human consumption. Still, one of the ways that criminals tried to make money during Prohibition was by producing their own booze illegally to sell on the black market. And can you guess what they stole to use as a key ingredient? Yep, the now tainted industrial alcohol. While the government didn't set out to purposely kill drinkers, it did seek to stop making industrial alcohol just so darn tasty to drink, leading to a number of alcohol poisoning deaths from those who bought booze from less than stellar brewers. From bad booze to big tobacco, did big cigarette companies really try to cover up?
That's crazy. Let me go back and see what was this called again. Methyl and wood alcohol. Because I looked up methyl alcohol and it gives me methanol. It literally gives me methanol. So, wow. That's crazy. So essentially, by regulating, I want to say by regulating the market, they ended up having bootleggers put in these toxic chemicals and then have since retracted those chemicals because now they realize that it's killing people, but it's still a profitable, business venture, a profitable way you can make money to tax the people. Wow, that's crazy. This is why I don't drink that much, but it's not really the same when I smoke as much. It's just as bad, especially when I get it from the dispensary. So it's just like they came in and regulated the weed business, and now we have to buy it from them. So who's to say if we're not smoking anything in here that's toxic? I mean, I recently just saw a video that was talking about that, so I guess that'll be my next video that I do. That'll be my next video I do, definitely, because I gotta put that video out there, spread that message, because some people might not even know. So let's keep on going with this one because we almost halfway through.
Tobacco. Did big cigarette companies really try to cover up the fact that smoking can kill? It seems almost quaint that anyone would try to lie about that, especially if you're used to seeing the often graphic smoking kills PSAs on TV and similarly unpleasant warnings on packs of cigarettes to dissuade people from buying them, or so that the companies making them can at least say they're being honest about it. But back at the beginning of the 1950s, new evidence was emerging that seemed to show an indisputable link between smoking cigarettes and developing lung cancer.
Jerry, turn that lying thing off. Ha! That's fucking wild. That shit ain't real. If only I'd listened.
Naturally, people knowing your product is deadly can be pretty bad for your business, never mind the moral and ethical implications of it slowly killing your customers. Tobacco companies had their bottom lines to worry about. As a result, they released a frank statement to cigarette smokers in January 1954, an advertisement campaign designed to dispute the recent scientific studies that linked smoking with its dangerous effects on people's health. The tobacco industry's campaign was intended to cast uncertainty on recent scientific findings and not only sway consumer opinions on smoking, but also undermine efforts by regulatory bodies to impose better guidelines on cigarette companies.
Yeah, Peepaw start coughing at the table now. It's not his old age. No, it's not the cigarette. Peepaw coughing because he's old and it's his time.
These then could have led to better standards and practices, potentially even making cigarettes less addictive and thus reducing the risk of causing further cases of lung cancer. The entire industry spent
Grandpa's not okay, Jimmy.
decades using PR strategies to knowingly deny the link between smoking and its serious negative health impacts, including refuting the scientific evidence that connected smoking with increased lung cancer cases in the USA and UK, misleading consumers into believing their products actually had benefits to their health, refuting the potential harms of inhaling secondhand smoke, claiming that nicotine wasn't addictive, and large cigarette corporations even established organizations designed to produce their own research that specifically aligned with the claims they made, all while knowing that smoking does kill in the interest of protecting their profits over public health. From no smoke without fire or potentially fatal illness to suspicions of a conspiracy within the world of sports, accusations of cheating, bribery, and rigging have been present in every major league for every sport in history, from football and basketball to even the boring stuff like fishing. But if hidden weights and frozen supermarket fish fillets stashed in prized catches prove anything, it's that sometimes these accusations are warranted. This was revealed to be the case with the Black Sox scandal. In a pivotal championship bout of the 1919 World Series, American League champs, the Chicago White Sox, were playing the Cincinnati Reds, champions of the National League. Over the course of a best-of-9 series, the Cincinnati Reds beat the White Sox 5-3, crowning them the winners of that year's World Series. But almost immediately after, rumors of an organized conspiracy among the members of the Chicago White Sox began to spread. 8 players in particular were accused: the 2 pitchers, Eddie Chicote and Claude Lefty Williams, the team's first baseman, Arnold Chick Gandil, shortstop Charles Swede Riceberg, the Sox third baseman, George Buck Weaver, 2 outfielders including power hitter Shoeless Joe Jackson and Oscar Happy Felsch, as well as an infielder named Fred McMullen. And yes, those are some of the best 1920s nicknames we've ever heard too. Although the suspicions of conspiracy among those players died down as the following year's season started, in September 1920, a grand jury began to investigate the allegations, particularly as they pertain to gamblers invading the sport of baseball. 4 of the accused players, Eddie Chicote, Lefty Williams, Happy Felsch, and Shoeless Joe Jackson, admitted that they threw the 1919 World Series in exchange for bribes. Court records suggest the players received between $70,000 and $100,000 for the loss. However, following a public trial in 1921, the indicted players were acquitted thanks to insufficient evidence. Suspiciously, the original confessions from the players had disappeared from the grand jury's files. All 8 of the now dubbed Black Sox were subsequently banned for life from continuing to play professional baseball. Jumping from the Black Sox scandal.
So imagine taking a $70,000 to $100,000 bribe on throwing a game and then potentially costing your entire professional career after that. That's why it's like sporting always been rigged. Like we know this. It's always been cheats in there, weighted gloves in boxing and stuff like that. But it's crazy to think that we're in a time now that what I'm seeing is apparently athletes are able to bet on themselves. Wasn't it illegal at a point in time for an athlete to bet on a game, on a match that they're participating in, just because of rigging reasons, or situations like that where they can throw the game if a lot of people have bets on a spread that they would have, how many points or whatever, and they intentionally don't hit that goal or they go over that goal. I don't know, man. It seemed like now getting into sports, it takes just as much brain power as getting into stocks, because you got to know who's going to be your reliable team, your reliable players. And I'm low-key kind of in that demographic. So it's like I done had my wins, I done had my losses, and it's time for me to come back, but now I got to come back smarter and harder. But let's get back to this video though.
to Operation Snow White, did a crazed cult really try to scrub any unfavorable reports about them by sending out thousands of undercover agents to infiltrate government agencies? Well, if you know anything about the Church of Scientology, their questionable belief system, and their allegedly abusive practices, then this might not come as much of a surprise. We're not looking to sully the good name of Mr. Tom Cruise here at the Infographics Show, but if you're allegedly part of a cult that allegedly has a torture chamber out in the California desert, then maybe it's not surprising that your ex-wife Katie Holmes and her daughter would start to think twice before hanging out with you. During the 70s, the largest infiltration of the United States government in history took place. However, rather than coming from outside forces like opposing nations or even an invasion of body snatchers, it came from within the U.S.
They got all these fucking drones outside the Church of Scientology dressed up as Snow White. And they're just so lost. Hi, welcome to the church. Welcome to the church. Hi, welcome to the church. I'm sorry. They just look so lost and complacent.
Covert agents from the Church of Scientology enacted what became known as Operation Snow White, wherein they installed wiretaps, stole documents, and used various other criminal means in an attempt to destroy anything bad about them and their founder, L. Ron Hubbard, on record. You know, the exact kind of thing you would do if your organization is entirely trustworthy and totally has nothing to hide, right? Gaining access to the likes of the IRS, the DEA, foreign embassies, and a total of 136 government agencies, the Scientology agents' other primary goal was to protect the church's tax exemption status, in order to avoid them having to pay millions in taxes. The U.S. government wasn't about to stand for this, however, and retaliated by sending 156 of their own agents on organized raids of various locations linked with Scientologists, uncovering evidence of the cult's illegal actions against the government, as well as other entities they perceived as enemies of the church. In December 1979, 11 high-ranking figures within the Scientology cult, including L. Ron Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, were arrested and received 5-year prison sentences. Hubbard himself managed to evade facing legal consequences for Operation Snow White. However, he would end up spending the remainder of his life in hiding from the authorities, considered to be an unindicted co-conspirator for his hand in having members of his cult infiltrating the U.S. government. From the weird things Scientologists do to some of the weird things Scientologists would probably believe, what's all this about evidence of extraterrestrials being buried in a desert somewhere in New Mexico? Believe it or not, this one is completely real. That video game adaptation of E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the Atari 2600 was so infamously bad that it's widely considered to be the worst video game of all time. The game was such a commercial failure that Atari took drastic measures, burying hundreds of thousands of unsold game cartridges in a landfill in New Mexico. The total number, as verified by Atari officials, was around 700,000 ETs discarded in the mass burial site until 2014, when the New Mexico government, alongside companies like Microsoft, worked to excavate a fraction of the abandoned alien life, around 1,300 cartridges. Okay, you got us. We cheated a little bit with that one. You were probably expecting us to talk about actual buried aliens, in New Mexico of all places, as if that would happen. But indeed, little green or gray men and flying saucers have long been a mainstay of conspiracy theories. For several decades, the idea of these outlandish theories even being proven to be true seemed beyond the realm of possibilities, no matter how many X-Files posters in college dorm rooms urged us to believe that the truth is out there. That is, until 2023. NASA released information pertaining to their findings on what they called unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. Moving away from the popularized UFO or unidentified flying object, the UAP program used to refer exclusively to unidentified aerial phenomena, but it was brought into a more general term for objects detected in the air, sea, or in space that defy an easy explanation. NASA publicly outlined how it would be researching possible incidents of UAPs and vowed to be more transparent with information to the public. Most interesting of all, though, was the conclusion of their report, that there was no reason to conclude that aliens were behind the hundreds of UAP sightings that NASA had already investigated. But even though the report didn't confirm that extraterrestrial life exists, NASA is still yet to deny that alien technology is potentially zipping around in Earth's atmosphere. We don't know about you, dear viewer, but we here at the Infographics Show want to believe that life from other planets is more like the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind than the xenomorphs in the Alien franchise. Taking a step away from invaders to our planet to...
So, I'm gonna just say this. I feel like aliens do exist. It just feels like it's a very, very slim possibility that we're the only sentient planet in the solar system, in the galaxy. What I feel is aliens come and go just to look at us, just to check up on us or whatever. But we have not advanced as a whole to be able to elevate to the realm where they are, because it's most likely a situation to where it's no war, it's just straight peace and love, no problems, and if whatever problems do arise, it's easily handled. There's no mass conflicts, everyone gets along. It just feels like we are, it's like we are that movie The Truman Show with Jim Carrey, but in planetary form, where we're under the scope of all the other planets that are out there watching in on us to get a laugh, to catch a 5-minute break from their work, job, life, whatever. Because realistically, us as humans, we are fucked up. We are crazy. We are all over the place, and we have racism. We have a whole list of problems I'm not really trying to get into in this video. But yes, aliens exist. We just ain't really see them yet. And for those who have, put an alien emoji down below.
Looking at a US invasion of another country that could have been launched based on a complete fabrication, one involving ghosts. The Gulf of Tonkin incident began on the 2nd of August 1964. It was an unprovoked attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats against a pair of US Navy destroyers, the USS Maddox and Turner Joy of the 7th Fleet. The crew of the Maddox, who had been involved in an intelligence-gathering mission, found that they were being approached by North Vietnamese torpedo boats and fired warning shots. The torpedo boats returned fire. A firefight broke out between them. After calling in air support from a nearby aircraft carrier, the Maddox could ward off the attacking boats, and the Turner Joy was sent to provide reinforcements. Then, 2 days later, the U.S. intercepted North Vietnamese communications that led them to believe another attack on their destroyers was being planned. Or at least that's the story presented to Congress by the National Security Agency. On a stormy night, both the USS Maddox and the Turner Joy were reportedly tracking multiple unidentified vessels that were rapidly approaching their positions, coming from different directions, and that these boats were somehow impossible to lock onto. Still, both ships fired upon what they thought were more torpedo boats and called in more air support. Yet, planes flying at low altitudes could see no signs of enemy ships. Still, the seemingly ghostly vessels and unproven attacks led Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which opened the floodgates for the direct involvement of the U.S. military in the Vietnam War. However, there was a striking lack of evidence that the allegedly unprovoked attacks even happened. The Tonkin ghosts were thought to have been false radar images, with North Vietnam's military commander, Vo Nguyen Giap, revealing that there had never been an attack on August 4th. It had all been an excuse by President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration for the U.S. to expand its war against North Vietnam. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was hardly the only maritime incident that officials went to great lengths to cover up. One that occurred in 1989 actually led to the deaths of 47 U.S. Navy crewmen, with the Navy attempting to use thinly veiled homophobia to smear one of the victims who lost his life. Aboard the battleship, the USS Iowa, in the Caribbean Sea, off the coast of Puerto Rico, a live fire exercise went drastically wrong. An explosion occurred in the number 2 16-inch gun turret, emanating from the center gun room. The blast was so devastating that it not only damaged the gun turret itself, but far worse, it claimed the lives of 47 crewmen. Naturally, following the incident, exactly what went wrong had to be determined. But of the multiple investigations launched into the USS Iowa turret explosion, their conclusions seemed to conflict dramatically. According to the Navy, one of the crew members who had died in the explosion aboard the Iowa had been directly responsible and had deliberately caused the blast that killed his fellow crew members. They claimed, and later leaked to the media, that gunner's mate second class Clayton Hartwig had been in a romantic relationship with another sailor and had then caused the explosion in the gun turret when their relationship had soured. However, there was no evidence that this had ever happened or that Hartwig was gay in the first place. Their investigation seemed to just be trying to implicate gay people in the deaths of multiple people for no reason. Stay classy, U.S. Navy. When the media around the victims' families disputed the Navy's findings and the U.S. Senate and House Armed Services Committee held inquiries into those conclusions, the Government Accountability Office, with the help of Sandia National Laboratories, were then asked to conduct their own investigation. Did they uncover some secret ploy by a gay crewman to enact an explosive murder self-destruction? Of course they didn't. Instead, a technical examination revealed that an excess of powder bags used in the gun's turret breach had been rammed in at a higher speed than it was designed for. The powder had then ignited during loading, resulting in the explosion. The Navy even conducted a test proving that an excess of powder was more likely to blame for the disastrous detonation. These new findings prompted the U.S. Navy to reopen the investigation. However, they still refused to accept accountability for any wrongdoing. Despite reports from the GAO and Sandia, they never apologized to Hartwig's family and instead closed the investigation, saying the cause of the explosion couldn't be accurately determined. The last conspiracy about lies told by the military got a little dour, but don't worry, this next one might be just as bad. It's about a harrowing testimony before Congress that described some truly heinous actions and that was instrumental in launching another armed conflict. How much do you want to bet it was completely made up? On the 10th of October 1990, a 15-year-old girl identified only as Nayira gave a tearful testimony to Congress. In it, she recounted witnessing firsthand Iraqi soldiers taking 15 babies out of incubators in a Kuwaiti hospital. The soldiers reportedly then left the newborn children on the ground to die. This had been following the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, which marked the beginning of the Gulf War. Nayira's testimony was widely publicized, and we do mean widely. It aired on 700 TV stations across the USA, with then President George Bush Sr. repeating the story almost verbatim at least 10 times in the weeks following, all to sway public opinion in favor of the Gulf War, justifying the US's position in backing Kuwait. Stop us when you figure out the twist in this one. The testimony by Nayira was completely falsified. Although it hadn't been revealed to the public, her full name was Nayira al-Sabah, the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, Saud al-Sabah. Her falsified testimony had been orchestrated by an American public relations firm, Hill & Knowlton, as part of the Citizens for a Free Kuwait campaign on behalf of the Kuwaiti government. The CIA had even requested that Nayira receive acting lessons before she testified before Congress. Amnesty International initially corroborated the story about the supposed killings, but it was later discovered that while some patients, including prematurely born babies, did die when Kuwait nurses and doctors fled during the Iraqi invasion, the troops had at no point stolen hospital incubators or intentionally left children to die. In response to the findings, there were subsequent accusations made against the Bush administration for attempting to manipulate the international human rights movement through the use of atrocity propaganda. As you've no doubt learned throughout this video, in the last part, the United States government is pretty much the undefeated world champion regarding conspiracies and cover-ups. What can we say? It's something we're just so darn good at. Ready for another one? Of course you are. Let's turn the clock back a few decades. The 50s and 60s were a crazy time for conspiracy theories. In fact, you could argue that much of the public fascination with conspiracies came into its own. Exposing the top-secret things the government doesn't want you to know became something of a national pastime, and one of the craziest of all was codenamed Operation Northwoods. In 1962, officials within the U.S. Department of Defense had proposed a
This game, you're not ready for it.
false flag operation that would see the Central Intelligence Agency carrying out acts of terrorism against American citizens on American soil. Additionally, on the hit list were military bases in Miami and Washington, along with plans to destroy U.S. ships as well as refugee boats coming into the States. There were talks of hijacking planes and planting phony evidence to implicate someone else in these various acts of terror. The big question is, why would the U.S. government want to attack Americans? To make them afraid of communism. Oh, of course. A few years earlier, in 1959, Fidel Castro had come to power in Cuba. He allowed communists to form part of his new government, improving relations between Cuba and the Soviet Union. Given the Cold War between the USA and the USSR, Castro created concern among some within the US government and military, so the goal of Operation Northwoods was to carry out attacks on innocent American civilians, as well as kill Cuban refugees, all while pinning these attacks on Castro and implicating the Cuban government. Ultimately, they wanted to paint a false image of the Cuban leader and misinform the American public in hopes it would encourage the sentiment that the US should wage a war against Cuba. Perhaps the most terrifying of all, Operation Northwoods was actually authorized by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, meaning the US almost came dangerously close to carrying out terror attacks on its own people in order to pin their deaths on Cuba. Fortunately, the operation was ultimately rejected by President John F. Kennedy. Of all the things he's remembered for, using his power to stop this absolutely heinous craziness was definitely one of his better decisions. So thanks for that one, JFK. When the government isn't at the heart of conspiracies, it's normally a nebulous, vaguely defined secret society secretly controlling the world through nefarious means. And the moment you hear someone arguing that such a group exists, be wary. Unfortunately, a lot of conspiracy theories center around a shadowy organization like the Illuminati and are usually just used by bigots to justify their very blatant and virulent anti-Semitic or racist worldviews. The people who are really up to some shady dealings are the rich and powerful, especially big businessmen and CEOs, in particular members of the Bohemian Club. Every July since 1872, some of the world's wealthiest, most powerful, and most influential figures head to a 2,700-acre campground in California. This is the Bohemian Club, an elite, invite-only social club initially founded in San Francisco. And on the surface, they've got all the things that'll raise your eyebrows. From a reported history of mysterious ceremonies, a top-secret guest list that's previously included presidents, some wealthy businessmen and military officials, and a weird stone owl statue on their retreat in Sonoma County. For years, the secrecy surrounding the tight-lipped club and their getaways to Bohemian Grove in Monte Rio, California, has fanned the flames of many conspiracy theories. Most of the stories revolve around the performance of pagan rituals and worship of that big stone owl that reportedly plays voice recordings of Walter Cronkite, who served as the anchorman for CBS Evening News for 19 years and was also a Bohemian Club member. While this all sounds like it could be just wild speculation by conspiracy theorists, the club's existence has been proven by several news organizations. Founded in 1892, the Bohemian Club was started by an all-male collection of artists, writers, lawyers, actors, and journalists from the San Francisco Examiner, all sharing interests in arts and culture. It quickly received attention and then funding from wealthy businessmen. And since its inception, the club has expanded to include the likes of Clint Eastwood, Henry Kissinger, even Presidents Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. Even in the modern day, the Bohemian Club maintains a reputation for having predominantly the richest and most politically conservative men in the United States. However, they weren't all gathering around an owl to perform human sacrifices or coordinate their efforts to maintain control of the world. Since its founding, the Bohemian Club has held regular gatherings for members, allowing them to socialize, drink, and enjoy theatrical and musical performances. They inhabited various temporary locations in their early decades before establishing a permanent headquarters in the 1930s over on Taylor Street in downtown San Francisco. They also host an annual summer retreat to Bohemian Grove, which is when things tend to get weird. Robed figures are reported to sacrifice an effigy to banish all the worries of the gathered members. From there, things just tend to descend into a lot of drunken debauchery. Really, the Bohemian Club is just an excuse for some of the wealthiest figures to act like a group of stereotypical frat guys. What happens in between is still a question many conspiracy theorists and people alike ask. Want to know more? Check out insane conspiracy theories that turned out to be true, or watch this video instead.
Alright, so we already know what happened at the Bohemian Grove with Alex Jones sneaking in there. Yeah, just some weird stuff. It really is just like a frat party kind of thing, because it was really the skull and bones that was more so looked at as, oh, the cloaked figures all dressing up and performing these weird satanic rituals and sacrifices and stuff. The Bohemian Grove is more like kind of like a watered down version of that, and it's just not To me, I don't feel it hit the same. But yeah, that's the video, guys. I'm going to leave the link down in the description. Let me know which one was your favorite conspiracy theory. And if none of them appeared here, what is your favorite conspiracy theory? Leave it down in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and comment. And most definitely hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you always stay updated when I drop a new video. And I love you. And I'll see you next time. Peace.